But again, with 12 and a half career WAR, you would never expect someone with that to be a former MVP, but Versailles is, and number 5 on the list. Number 4 on the list, and the next two are both relief pitchers. We'll start with Willie Hernandez, relief pitcher, won both the American League MVP and Cy Young in 1984 as a member of the Detroit Tigers. Very strong season, at least for a closer. 9-3, 1.92 ERA, 32 saves, 0.94 WHIP, and 112 strikeouts and 140 in the third innings. It's debatable whether he should have been MVP. Hard to really understand how a closer could really win MVP, but, at least in that time they threw more innings than they do today. Probably still should have went to someone else, though. For his career, 13 years, 147 saves, 3 All-Star appearances, 3.38 ERA. Again, another guy who barely had more than 1 WAR a season with a career 16.6 WAR, and never got another Cy Young or MVP vote in any of his other 12 seasons. And once his name was put on the Hall of Fame ballot, it stayed there very briefly, as he only finished with 0.4% of the vote in 1995. Number 3 on the list, as I mentioned, another relief pitcher, and this is Jim Constanti. And let me real quickly mention that, for baseball at least, and hockey, I did the MVPs from 1950 on. I figured a lot more would be obscure if I went prior to 1950, especially for fans, just of, the new era, who wouldn't really know many of the older players. So for any guys from before 1950 who may have won MVP were not included. So if you think I'm totally forgetting about someone, maybe that's why. But let's get back to the list. I forgot to mention that. Number 3, Jim Constanti, just broke the mark with winning it in 1950. National League MVP, relief pitcher, Philadelphia Phillies. 16 wins on the year with 7 losses. Led the NL with 74 games pitched and 22 saves. Finished with a 2.66 ERA. 56 strikeouts only in 152 innings. Of course, strikeouts weren't as prevalent as they are today, but nearly a 1-to-1 strikeout-to-walk ratio. The 56 strikeouts and 50 walks, and had a 1.04 WHIP on the season. For his career, 11 seasons, 3.46 ERA, 76 saves, 1.30 WHIP. Not very elite, we'll say. It's about an average WHIP. And 11.8 WAR for his career. Again, another player with barely over 1 WAR a season. That 1950 season was his only All-Star Game appearance. I don't think I have to tell you that he is not a member at Cooperstown for the Baseball Hall of Fame. Obvious choice for the top 10. He lands at number 3. Number 2 is the one hockey representative. That is Al Rollins. Now, there's only been 2 players in NHL history, I believe, who won MVP, are eligible for the Hockey Hall of Fame, and are not in it. One was, I want to say his name was Tom Anderson, and he won MVP, I believe, in the late 30s. The other is Al Rollins. Al Rollins, a goalie, won the Hart Trophy in the 1953-54 season with the Chicago Blackhawks. Do you want to know what his record was the season he was named MVP? 12 wins, 47 losses, and 7 ties. That's right, he nearly had 4 times as many losses as wins, yet won MVP. I'm sure the voters thought a lot differently. over 60 years ago now, but, just look at that record. I don't care if his goals against average was 0.5. I just can't fathom how, he could have been voted MVP. It's not even like he was terrible. 3.23 goals against average that year was 6th in the NHL. But you look at his career, 9 seasons, 81 wins, 171 losses, and 56 ties for his career. So more than twice as many losses as wins, and this guy is a former MVP. Actually did win the Vezina in the 1950-51 season, and that was more deservedly so, even though he only played in about half the games for the Toronto Maple Leafs, going 27-5-8 with NHL leading 1.77 goals against average. Team did win the Stanley Cup, and that the 1954 was his only All-Star appearance in his 9 seasons. That's just 12-47-7, yet was named MVP. And yes, I know, Rollins was on some bad Chicago Blackhawks teams, but, can you imagine voting a quarterback MVP, if they go 3-13, regardless of how good they are? If their defense gives up 80 points a game and they're throwing 5-6 touchdowns a game, they're probably still not going to be voted MVP. Not really a fault on their own, but 12-47-7. It's not like he led the NHL in any statistics for a goalie. He didn't. It's just hard for me to wrap my finger around that one. He's number 2 on the list. Number 1 on the list because it's just really hard to believe that the NFL, and for the NFL I did Associated Press MVPs, AP. It's hard to believe that the AP once voted a kicker as the MVP. And yes, this was an abbreviated strike season of 1982, where the regular season was just 9 games. But regardless, you're really going to vote a kicker as the MVP? That kicker was Mark Moseley with the Washington Redskins. Yes, the Redskins won the Super Bowl that year. Still doesn't really change the fact that they voted a kicker as the MVP. And that's, no offense to him. He had a very good season. Went 20-21 on field goals, 16-19 on extra points. That's 7 points a game he gave the Redskins. But still a kicker for MVP. That's just hard to believe that actually happened, but that's how it was voted in 1982. Mark Moseley winning the MVP. For his career, he did play a long 16 seasons. Made the Pro Bowl that year and one other season. And was 300 for 457 on career field goals, 65.6%. And made 482 of 512 extra points, 94.1%. So, Mark Moseley definitely above average kicker for his career, but a former MVP. I don't think there's ever been another kicker who's even sniffed MVP, and, they may have had even better seasons than Moseley. Again, just like Al Rollins, hard to understand what the heck the voters were thinking regarding that MVP vote, but Mark Moseley could always say not only is he a former Super Bowl winner, but he's also a former MVP. So that will do it for the top 10 list. Most obscure MVPs. I'm sure you may have heard of some of these players, especially guys like Kennedy and Pendleton. So they're not necessarily obscure, but they're obscure in the sense that you would never really consider them to be a former MVP, at least from looking at their career numbers. But they are. And, none of these 10 guys really are even close to being even in consideration for their respective sports Hall of Fame. But they will always be able to say that they once won the most valuable player award in their sport. So, episode number 77 is over. I thank you, all my listeners, for tuning in once again. I please ask you to become a follower of the show. That will always allow you to know when I am on the air. Most of the time that is Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern. Sometimes things occur where that has to change. So always be in the know by becoming a follower of Real Sports Talk with Kenny Kluska. So, till next week, as I mentioned, hopefully we'll have, some trade news in baseball to talk about. Maybe more basketball. We'll be a week closer to the NFL and the Olympics. With football another week closer, maybe I'll start talking about that. And, a lot of options. We'll see what goes down. Until next week, thank you all. Have a great night. Enjoy your work week. Good night.